So a couple of weeks ago I did a video which was called The End of the Artist, or something like that, and the basic gist of it, I was talking about the idea of the solitary genius, maybe being something of the past, and I was talking a little bit about AI and what the future might hold there, and some of the things that other people had sort of been talking about on YouTube. And it was quite interesting reading the comments from that video. A lot of people really against, and understandably so, against the idea of AI generated music and a future where that is more prominent. And I think in that video I wasn't necessarily trying to put across that AI generated music is a good thing or a bad thing, just thinking, or just talking about some of my ideas and things I'd been thinking about at the time. But one of the comments was quite interesting, and I can't remember who it was that commented, but basically saying how they perceived that maybe music was going to become more local and maybe even sort of tribal in the future as a result of people not wanting to engage with the sort of mass media machine and AI content generation, etc, etc, etc. And as that becomes more prevalent, people will turn towards their sort of local artists or local scene more so. So that's kind of what I wanted to talk about in this video today. Possibly an alternative to what I was talking about in that video. Hello, my name is Richard Charles, and thank you for tuning in to today's video. If you've not been here before, my videos tend to sort of focus on modular synth and electronic music and creativity and so on. And in today's video, I want to talk about this idea of maybe music becoming sort of more local, maybe even more human, as a reaction to the over proliferation of AI in the mainstream media, etc. So let's get into it. So I think, music has always been a very communal thing. Before record labels existed, before music was a form of mass media, before streaming, before all of that, music was very much a local, social, even sort of ritualistic thing. Even if it was just the simple idea of, maybe somebody having an instrument and local people, friends gathering around and singing songs together. Maybe, I don't know, the whimsical idea of people stood around a piano of an evening singing songs. And I think probably music was distributed not in recorded form, but probably either through sheet music, if you were wealthy enough to be able to afford that sort of thing, or just passed on, orally from one person to another. I have no basis to make that assumption. It's just, the way that I would imagine things happened. People would have come together in churches to sing hymns and, as part of worship. And probably for most people that would have been, their main exposure to music. Maybe a few musicians that might have played in a pub or something like that, perhaps. That kind of thing where you have a piano in the corner and somebody gets up and plays a few tunes on the piano. So music would have been a very sort of localized, communal, social activity until we reach the point where music can be recorded and record companies start to see that money can be made from that, and that music doesn't need to be sort of live and performed anymore, and that people want to actually buy records and listen to records, and collect that music. And I think that's also the point at which music starts to become fixed, and no longer do we see the emphasis on improvisation, but musicians have to start playing what has been recorded on the record because that's what audiences want to hear. And throughout history, we can probably say that, different forms of media have changed the way that musicians respond or to what the audience wants. Whether that be, the advent of recorded music in the first place, or the CD allowing albums to be longer, streaming, which changes the way that people engage with music and consume music. So music, however, has always had this this element of community, and a really, really good example of that is tribal people from the Central African Republic, the Aka people. So I'm involved in a project at the moment where I'm working with some archive material from these people, and so I've sort of learned a little bit about them, and their connection with their environment and music is really, really deep. And for them, music is a way of connecting to the spirits of their environment, and they're a very musical people, and they have an ability to sort of create music out of all sorts of things within their environment. I even came across a video of I think 3 women playing a river, literally standing in the river and slapping and splashing the music, slapping and splashing the water rhythmically to create music. These people obviously don't care about recorded music or streaming or any of the things that we take for granted in the Western world. And for them, music and the act of making music is a very spiritual thing, and a very communal thing. And I guess you could say that throughout history, music wasn't performed for people. It was really performed with people, and very much a collective act, and less so a product to be monetized. And it's only really in sort of the latter part of the 20th century that music has become this sort of commodity that has been monetized. And that's what we see today. Maybe we've even reached the end point of that, where the monetization of music has really reached this extreme point with streaming and now AI generated music. And in that respect, the listener is now very much a consumer. The artist is a brand, quite often a brand that's owned by a larger organization. When we think of the record company, or even if it's an AI artist owned by streaming companies themselves. And we have access to infinite amounts of music, but what we've lost is that connection and community that we had before all these technologies came along. And it's still there to a certain extent. If you think of people going to festivals, to gigs, to even clubbing, where people are gathering socially to enjoy music and dance and whatever else. But it's not quite the same thing, I think, as the sense of community that we had in the past. And what potentially we have now, or what we can see now, is that AI is kind of generating or accelerating this I don't know, you might even call it the collapse of culture, the collapse of mass culture, through generic music which is available on streaming platforms. And for the masses, the people who consume mass pop music, that's probably okay. For the majority of people who are not musicians and are not going to engage with more challenging types of music, they probably don't care so much about whether it's generated by AI or whether it is real people in a room playing together. But there's that accounts for a certain large percentage of the population, but we might not necessarily call those people music lovers. those people are probably not like super fans of any particular artist. You know, and if I think of, you know, certain friends that I have that they enjoy music, but they've never bought CDs, they've never been to a concert. They like having things on in the background, and they might have a few tunes that they enjoy, but they're not necessarily music fans. And probably, you know, the vast majority of people that are like that don't care whether the music is AI generated or not. They just want a good tune on in the background that they can dance to and have a bit of fun with. Whereas, you know, there are a whole bunch of other people that would probably describe themselves as music fans, and it can be obsessive in that regard, and will devote hours and hours of their time and energy to listening to the music of their favourite artists, the favourite bands, you know, tracking down merchandise, going to concerts, etc, etc, etc. And those aren't always people who are also musicians. Those are quite often just genuine fans of the music. Then you've got a whole other bunch of people who are actually musicians themselves and make music or perform music, and maybe have a slightly even more discerning ear than your average music fan as a result of their musical abilities. And again, those people are probably more inclined to want to hear music made by real people. And I would say that the majority of people who watch these videos on this channel fall into that latter category. So what was interesting was this idea from this one comment that maybe an overabundance of AI generated music, fake music for want of a better word, might start to drive people back towards this idea of local community, and might start to drive people towards more sort of intimacy and authenticity in their music, where they don't just want to hear some generic thing that is created by a machine, but they actually want to start engaging with people more because they're seeking some form of connection, some form of tribalistic social connection perhaps. And I think, you know, this is already starting to develop to a certain extent in the fact that, you know, we see a lot of things, not en masse, but a lot of stuff on the internet now about people ditching Spotify, artists ditching Spotify, ditching streaming platforms in favour of Bandcamp, where they can create or grow a community around their music. And then, you know, I've talked before about sort of local nights and events in your local area. So here in the UK we have this EMOM movement, which occurs in various cities around the country, which is sort of a improvisational electronic music night, where people can go and perform, almost sort of like a, you know, your traditional sort of pub jam night where musicians go and perform and people come and join in and listen. But that's a real sort of small localized community of people that are coming together to perform and play music. And then I'm also seeing around the country lots of other small live events that are popping up in churches and you know, coffee shops, etc. Of a night time when these places are normally closed. Maybe once a month somebody has decided to go out and put on these nights and try and draw in an audience, and quite often it will be really interesting and good music, whether it's folk music or you know, or weird rock music or electronic music or whatever. You know, it's quite often not your standard pop music or, you know, rock music, of which there are many venues that will play that sort of stuff live. It's usually the sort of weirder stuff, the, you know, jazzier stuff, whatever. But I'm seeing these sorts of events popping up all over the place, and that is quite an interesting thing as well. That again, they're catering to small communities of people that get to know that promoter, and people are going month after month, irrespective of the artists that are performing, because they know that there's going to be good music there. And so maybe, you know, in the future we will start to see more sort of niche groups where people are connected by a sort of shared taste in music, and maybe even sort of shared geography. You might even call this sort of like post algorithmic tribes, people gathering around meaning and connection rather than something which is viral. And so, you know, maybe this will mean that we see a return of you know, live performance being more akin to what it was before the recorded record or the record industry established itself. So, you know, performance and improvisation and interaction with the audience becoming more common and more important. Possibly seeing those kind of performances popping up on YouTube, whether recorded or as a live stream, but definitely out in the real world. And hopefully that means that music will be something that people experience together rather than just, you know, scrolling through whatever social media or listening to whatever pops up randomly that Spotify thinks you might enjoy because it's similar to the music that you've already engaged with. And I could also see how, actually, sort of paradoxically, AI could be helpful in this, and as a tool, AI could be used to sort of facilitate these kind of creative gatherings, you know, and help people actually set up their own events or you know, businesses, whatever you want to call it. You know, if you want to set something up in your local area and you don't know how to do it, you don't know how to go about it, you can turn to ChatGPT and you can get it to come up with some kind of plan of how you can get this thing off the ground, and, you know, from there go about setting up your own little community. And if we go back to thinking about those people from Central African Republic, the Aka people, you know, for them, they use music as communion. It helps them to connect with each other, it helps them to connect with nature and to connect with spirit. And maybe that is something which potentially could become more common or could grow in the future, and we see music returning to the roots of what it was, maybe in times past, times gone by. And so maybe the next evolution of music isn't necessarily technical, it isn't AI, you know, maybe it is a return to presence and listening and empathy and awe and so on. And so as AI becomes more intelligent, if it is intelligent, maybe our job is to become more aware and to become better listeners and more aware of the artists and the music around us. And maybe music won't be bigger and faster and more digital, it will actually be smaller and slower and more human. And I don't think AI will destroy music. I think it will, if anything, it will bring us back to what it always meant to be, which is a way to connect with people. So yeah, that's I guess that is what I wanted to talk about in today's video. So thank you very much for watching. Hope you found that interesting, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on that in the comments, and how you know, how you think music might change in the future, whether we will you know, the shininess of AI will fade and we will become less interested in that in general. Whether this potentially could, you know, herald a new era of connection and humanity in music. So thank you for watching. As ever, if you did enjoy this video, hit the like button and subscribe and all that jazz, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks very much. Cheerio.